And we're back with the Thesaurus Sessions. This is Benny Goodman's band that we're investigating. We're deep into it. And we, being Nick Rossi, banjo, guitar, Hal Smith, drummer, and other percussion as well. Loren Schoenberg with you. I'm coming to you from the Bronx. We have Hal's in Searcy, Arkansas, and from San Francisco, California, we have Nick. And I don't know what episode this is of our series, but we already did some stuff before these 51 tracks, but it's so much fun, and I'm enjoying spending time with you folks, and I actually look forward to it, which shows you how crazy I am. But anyway, let's get Harpo. Okay, I told you. Okay. But anyway, we're getting back into the music here. We've explained several times exactly what this Thesaurus Rhythm Maker Sessions is. It is a transcription session. These records never came out at the time. They were done under a pseudonym. Goodman's band was on their way up, and they were done for radio play. I'll tell you one interesting thing I did see in a late 1935 Metronome magazine. Was in the course of the little columns of, listen to this and so tell band. Someone said, listen to the Rhythm Makers transcriptions that WMCA is playing in New York. They're Benny Goodman's band. Oh. So, somebody was hip to it, and they wanted to let, the people who are listening for stuff to check it out. So just interesting that they actually were kind of known at the time among small group of people, but that somehow word of this stuff got out. This is just as Goodman has started recording for Victor Records, and his fame is just starting. So let's get to the music. We have at least three Fletcher Henderson charts in this segment. We'll begin with Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea. Well, there you have it. Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea, a classic Fletcher Henderson arrangement that the band was going to record very shortly thereafter on July 1st, 1935, the same record session that brought us the famous King Porter Stomp and all that stuff with Bunny Berrigan on the trumpet. But this is a previous version, obviously, and it has all the great hallmarks of Fletcher Henderson, the call and response, the counterpoint, a little bit of dynamics there in the last chorus. Those rolling backgrounds. I remember, playing that, da 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 da, and you realize how much in those Fletcher Henderson arrangements are almost like the right hand of a Fats Waller solo, or something like that. How much the language of those stride pianists and all that got into Fletcher Henderson's writing. A little faster than the studio recording, and no vocal. Helen Ward sang it, and here we heard Frank Froba. And we've been talking a lot about Frank Froba during the show, and there was an interesting profile written just after he left the Goodman Band. It appeared, I think, in a December 1935 Metronome, I believe it is. And Nick, I was wondering if you would do us the honors of just read us the darn thing, because Frank Froba is kind of like the last man standing from the earlier Goodman rhythm sections. And he deserves his due. I mean, most of these other folks, Jess Stacy, who we'll get to in a moment, Alan Roos, Harry Goodman, actually very, very little written about. And certainly Gene Krupa, a lot written about. But even I think more people know who Harry Goodman is than know who Frank Froba is. But he was quite a figure. And Loren, he's from New Orleans, which was news to me. So I'm wondering if I could ask you to do the honors and read the profile.
Gladly. Let me put on the glasses and join the Specs crowd.
I'll take mine off. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'll move over to the reading room.
Okay.
So this is an article titled "The Metronome Nominates for Musicians Hall of Fame Frank Froba," and interestingly, he is characterized in the photo as a swing pianist, which for the time and certainly for his background is kind of an interesting categorization. So Frank Froba is undoubtedly one of the greatest swing pianists of the day. With his remarkable technique coupled with a natural feel for swing, he sits down at those keys and just lets loose with a most amazing array of ideas and executions. He's a New Orleanser. I don't know if that's a real word, but he's a New Orleanser, born there in August 1907. He started to study piano at the age of 10. At 15, he played his first job. Froba loves to tell about that job. Quote, "I was just a kid, but I got it because I was the only guy in town who could both read and play oompa, and make believe my oompa didn't go over big. Boy, I never will forget how I really did oompa. Yes, we have no bananas," unquote.
And we heard, yes, we have no bananas as part of this record session.
Exactly. It wasn't long before Frank started working steadily. He much preferred that to going to military academy. At 17, he came all the way up to New York, opening with Johnny Detroit's band at the Balconies Ballroom, succeeding the original Memphis Five. It looked like the beginning of a promising career, but in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Froba took sick and they had to take him home. Then some pipe organ work at the Palace... Where did I lose it? Palace Theater in New Orleans, and some pianoing at the old Absinthe Club. Harold Oxley passed through one day and with his band heard Frankie gave him a job, and by 1926, Frankie was back in New York. Since then, he's been with all sorts of name bands: Frank Cornwall, Jerry Freeman, Enoch Light, Casa Loma, Will Osborne, Roger Wolf Kahn, and recently with Benny Goodman. The recent arrival of his second child stopped Frank from making the Western trip with the Goodman. Right now, though, musicians are hearing much of him, for he's doing plenty of playing down at the Onyx Club. He's also made a flock of Decca records recently with Johnny Davis's band, Red McKenzie's Rhythm Kings, the Onyx Club Boys, and Bob Howard and his orchestra. A fine fellow, Frank Froba, easygoing, modest, at times a bit too much of a pessimist. He's happily married, lives in the Bronx, and can always be directed by the dark brown collegiate hat, which he seldom takes off, and a white Fifth Avenue style collar which he'll wear with any color shirt. Now, I wonder if that's a Brooks Brothers collar.
That's a weird way to end an article.
It is. I think that's the writer running out of ideas.
Yes. Okay. But anyway, I thought it was nice, to give Frank Froba his due, and so I guess he does wind up on a number of sessions at the time, and the way he plays out, he was a swing pianist. He could fit in with those people. Have either of you encountered him on other records? Hal, you've talked several times, I'm sorry, about how he plays on those 1932 Rhythm Maker sides.
That's right. And also before that, he played with Jack Purvis, the outlaw trumpet player. He's on the 1930 session that also had Adrian Molini and J.C. Higginbottom. And Frank Froba is on all of those. And he's also on the last known record of Jack Purvis from about 1935. I think it's called Church Mouse on the Spree.
Yeah.
And that's where Purvis says, yeah, Frankie, you're huffing and puffing like you're at the Reefer Smokers Ball. Put that one up sometime.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Fine pianist. And as I've said on previous programs, he reminds me of Zinke Cohn, the Chicago pianist who played with Jimmy Noon. And also I hear Alex Hill in his playing. That's somebody I guess he could have heard in New York because they was there at the same time. I don't know if it was an influence, but that's what I hear. But I really like the way, the more I hear of him, the more I like his playing. And that last whole solo was very, very nice.
Yeah.
He made the most of his time on that, and I'm glad he got a whole chorus.
Yeah. So where do we go from Gene Krupa and Alan Roos on that track? I mean, that's it seems like a quintessential 1935 Benny Goodman, Fletcher Henderson, full steam ahead kind of thing.
I said it swings from the very first note. That's kind of a hallmark of a Fletcher Henderson arrangement. And the guys in the rhythm section made the most of that. That's, to my ears, maybe Nick will disagree with this, that's the most 4/4 I've heard out of Alan Roos in a few sides from this session. And I heard a lot of 2-beat from Harry Goodman, and it works so well together for one of them to play 4 and the other to play 2. Gene Krupa was holding back a little bit. He played on the stem of the hi-hat and the closed cymbals on the first chorus, and basically just played accents with choke and crash cymbals and some very well-placed rib shots. Didn't really cut loose too much, but it was such a swinging arrangement and the whole band was swinging. I don't think he needed to do very much. He played exactly what he needed to do to work as a team with the rhythm section and really make it go.
Nick?
Yeah, no disagreements at all from me, Hal, on this one. I mean, what struck me most about this record was how it so very much sounded like a Benny Goodman record. And what I mean by that is I don't know who else this sounds like, before or since. I mean, yes, it's a Fletcher Henderson arrangement, but it doesn't sound like a Fletcher Henderson recording from the prior year. That rhythm section is just so unquestionably Benny Goodman. And it's pretty amazing that it's, here we are just a few months into this particular lineup, maybe even less than a few months, depending on how long Alan Roos has really been with the band at this point in time. And it sounds like what we expect to hear from the band. And it sounds great. This is definitely the kind of straightest 4/4 time playing we've heard from Roos, I think, if not to date, certainly in a few sides. And, it goes back to the thing we were talking about, how the rhythm section are making these kind of micro adjustments on the fly, playing off of each other and adjusting. And, there's even a point during Froba's solo that Roos really drops out and is really just, I think he's still there. I think I could hear him very far in the background, but, gave Froba plenty of space to do his oompa that he clearly was so well known for.
Yeah, yeah. And again, just for folks who may not have heard the previous broadcast, when we talk about straightening out or even or something like that, I believe that what you guys are referring to is the fact, like kind of like a relatively flowing 4/4 with less of the 2 and 4 thing that Roos is kind of known for. Is that
That's
right?
exactly what we're talking about. When I say straighten out, I mean playing pretty straight time 4/4 even quarter notes. Kind of what people think of, when people say today, play Freddie Green on the guitar. Most people, that's shorthand for kind of playing 4/4, four beats to the bar. So whenever I'm talking about straightening out that beat, that's usually what I'm talking about. Less syncopation, less accents on either the 1 and 3 or the 2 and 4.
Does the duration of the note change when he's playing like a chang, chang, even the way I'm singing it? Is it short, long, or is it equal duration when he's doing his backbeat, when he's doing his 2 and 4? Are the notes actually the same duration? Is just an accent different, or is it actually shorter and longer?
They're shorter and longer. This is a great topic, Loren. Something I've been doing this week as part of my homework. I've been trying to listen to other rhythm sections that were recording at the same time in New York that were kind of the name jazz bands, and listening to like how Alan Roos plays backbeat, how Alan Roos accents 2 and 4 as compared to how Al Norris does with Luncifer's band, who's recording around the same time, or how Lawrence Lucy, who we've talked about, who was recording with the Blue Mills Rhythm Band at the same time. And there's really subtle changes in the amount of time you're giving to each of those quarter notes. And I know that sounds a little odd, but I think I talked about this the last episode. When you're playing the guitar, there's 2 mechanisms for sound. One is how you're controlling the chord that you're fingering in the left hand, and you can dampen it, you can choke it. So you can make it a real crisp 1 or a real crisp 2, or you can let it ring. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2, or 1, 2, 1. Well, it's the same thing, isn't it? But my point is, you can shift both the accent as well as the duration of the note. And we're talking about, micro measurements at this point in time, but it does have an overall effect. And oftentimes when I'm talking about rhythm players of the time, I'll characterize some other players as having a bigger beat. And what I mean by that is that they're giving more time to each quarter note. So the quarter notes are kind of rubbing elbows, if you will, rather than, beat, pause, beat, pause. It's more beat, 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 if that makes sense.
Yeah. Hal, what's it like for you when you play with a strict rhythm guitar and when you don't?
When I play with a strict rhythm guitar, it does influence what I play. I don't play as if I might have any tendency to play busy. I tend not to do that. I try to amplify what the guitar is doing. Generally, I'll play straight 4/4 with the brushes, unaccented 4/4 with the brushes, or I'll get on the hi-hat and play sort of a Joe Jones style as well as I can do it. But I let the guitar be the section leader when I play with a strong guitarist, and I just try to work around it. When I play in a rhythm section without a guitar, I play a lot looser. I tend to play more fills, and I might play more ride cymbal or play on the Chinese cymbal, play more turnarounds on the tom-toms and other things. But I like to respect the guitar and just try to work with it instead of stepping on it or getting in its way, because I love the sound of a guitar leading the way in a rhythm section. That's one of the greatest things about playing a rhythm section for me.
We have to play together.
Married. I was going to say, this sounds like... Have you guys met? Have you actually met?
I was going to say, I'm looking for my wallet to hand the money through the Zoom here.
Send it to PayPal.
Yeah, right.
Have
No,
you
I'm
actually
serious.
met?
I love that. No.
We have
Okay.
never played together. We've never met face to face.
Right.
Believe
right,
it
right.
or not.
Yeah.
But
I met Nick.
I'm.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
ahead.
no, go ahead, please.
No, I was going to say I met Nick for coffee once in Palo Alto area. But we have not played together. We've not made music
Wow.
together. And Hal, I know through the internets, as they say.
Right. And the same with Nick. We've never crossed paths. I hope we do, and likewise with you.
Yeah.
One of these times.
Yeah.
Well, let's be fair, Loren. We have made music virtually.
Yes, that's true. That's true. And we will, and the three of us, the theme song that you've all been hearing during this series is this unholy trio here. So that little music that you hear at the top and end of every episode, that's us. So, but we just have to do it in person soon. All right, so let's get back to the session. We should mention Pee Wee Irwin on a bit of a trumpet solo on that last track. If you guys can remind me, and I'll remind you too, I should get in the habit of just always mentioning all the soloists, because sometimes I get tied up and I don't. Now we're going to go to the Royal Garden Blues.
that was interesting. That didn't go at all where I thought it was going to go. I thought it was going to start in kind of a 2/4 feel and then really get swinging when the trio strain came up. But it kind of had a stiff feel almost to the end there. Very, very strange arrangement. I'm not sure that's a Spud Murphy arrangement, although some of his do go different directions. I don't think that was one. Once again, Gene Krupa was a little bit under wraps there, just playing press rolls, just basically playing time with press rolls, a few tom-tom accents, a few rim shots. I noticed he played the fourth beat and the first beat, 1, 2, 3, bum, bum, a couple of times on the tom-tom. That's a very New Orleans thing that he could have heard from Baby Dodds or Zooty Singleton, Tubby Hall, any of the guys he listened to in Chicago. I like the way the rhythm section shifted back and forth between 2/4 and 4/4, and not all of them playing the same way at the same time. I heard Harry Goodman play 4 while Alan Roos was playing 2, and Krupa went back and forth between 2 and 4 on the bass drum. It just made it a very interesting texture in the rhythm section when not everybody's playing the same way all the way through. And at the very end, Gene got on the hi-hat and brought the intensity of the whole performance up to a very white-hot level as far as I'm concerned. Also, that was Nate Casbeer on trumpet, soloing on that. I could tell by his phrasing. And he had a kind of southwestern beat, I call it, that Yank Lawson and Benny Strickler and other trumpeters of that era who were from the Southwest played with a little bit of a relaxed feel instead of the way that Harry James or Bunny Berrigan and some of the other star trumpeters of the era played.
I think you've also commented about the trumpet solo on the 1928 record of Benny Moten's record of South.
Right.
Has a little hump in it, a little
that's right.
lag. Could you go into that just for a moment? I mean, I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, I'll tell you where I got that information. I was talking to Bob Helm, clarinetist who played with Lou Waters and Turk Murphy in San Francisco. During World War II, he played with trumpeter Benny Strickler, who I just mentioned from Arkansas. He played with Bob Wills and then wound up in the Bay Area, took over for Lou Waters when Waters went into the armed services in World War II. And he played that style that you hear on the Benny Moten record of South, with a little bit of a hitch, rhythmic hitch in the pulse. It's like the exact opposite of Wild Bill Davison or someone like that who played with a real forward momentum. It's nice and relaxed, like life in the Southwest was at that point in time. And I asked Bob Helm, where do you think Benny Strickler got that concept? And Helm said, well, I think that's typical of the Southwestern trumpet players. I thought about that, and I dug out my record of South by Benny Moten and heard Lamar Wright play that way and play a break where you could almost read a chapter of a book between the beats. It was so relaxed. And I thought about that. I thought, well, Yank Lawson plays that way. He was from Missouri. Nate Casbeer from Lawrence, Kansas. And Danny Alguire, who also played with Bob Wills and later with the Firehouse Five and played with Benny Strickler, was from Oklahoma. I thought about it and I said, that really is a Southwestern thing. All those guys had that little hitch in their phrasing instead of playing lots of notes or pushing the beat like Muggsy Spanier or someone like that. They laid back, and sometimes way back. But that's one way I can tell Nate Casbeer on these sessions from Pee Wee Irwin.
Yeah.
Who was more influenced by Bunny Berrigan.
Sure. And you know, I know that we'd gotten slightly into this episodes ago, and of course we're not counting on that everyone has listened to every moment of every episode. So it's good, you know, going over these things again. South, it's interesting. South had been a big hit for Benny Moten on an acoustic 78. I forget, maybe it was 1923 or something. And then they redid it for the electrical Victor in 1928, which was, you know, the redo. And that one, as I've read, was one of the best-selling 78s in the entire Victor catalog, because it came out so early. And I've had friends who say, that you could find it on a jukebox in the 1940s and 50s.
That's right.
Which is really, really interesting.
And it was extremely popular in the Midwest and Southwest too. It's one of those tunes that the Western swing bands kind of took and adopted to their repertoire. So it's definitely one of those kind of crossover hits, I guess you'd call it.
That's one that Bob Wills used, I guess, about 75% of the time to start a dance with his
I had
Texas
no idea.
Playboys.
Oh, geez. Yeah. So, see, that's what I love about this stuff, is that there's so many threads that go out from a Goodman Band rendition in 1935, just into all these various places. Before we go to Nick, I'll just comment on, I think you're right. I had surmised that it might be Spud Murphy, but I don't think it is. It reminds me, I can't remember which. There was one other arrangement that we heard among these thesaurus rhythm makers where I commented on the fact that there's one voicing for the band. And this chart, I'll bet it couldn't be by the same arranger, because it's this one thing he does for the band in unison. And it really doesn't vary. And then you hear that one moment, the booba, the booba, the booba, the boo, the clarinets, and they go with the trombones. But whenever the band plays, it's usually in a concerted block. There's no counterpoint. And the rhythm is kind of bump, bump. It's very downbeaty. There's not much happening there. So in terms of ranking it in the context of the best arrangements of the Thesaurus Rhythm Maker series, this one, not quite Siskel and Ebert here, but I think, Nick, you just captured it. I think. So for me, the outstanding characteristic was the rhythm section. Sure. And they really got a workout. What did you hear from Alan Roos, who's so well recorded?
Yeah, he's really well recorded. We got to hear some higher voicings in his chords, as we've heard on quite a few of these sides now. Which again, kind of, as Alan moved further into the 30s, he moved a little less away from. So it's really interesting to hear them, not only as their evidence that they were once part of the Roos style, but just you can really hear what notes he's playing pretty well, which is rare for something of this era. There was a really interesting moment to me from a rhythm section player and as a guitarist, when Gene went to what I thought was a ride cymbal underneath Benny's solo. And yet we still could hear the guitar really, really well. I think it was the last episode I was talking about how so often on these records, and certainly in the time since these records, when a drummer will go to the ride, it often will kind of wash out the guitar solo or the guitar playing, because it's fighting for the same kind of sonic space that those instruments live in. And it was really interesting to me how clearly we could still hear the rhythm guitar, even though Gene was on the ride. And I was hoping to maybe get a little more input from Hal on, technically maybe how that was possible, because it really surprised me. It caught me off guard, because we've heard a prior side where Gene went to the ride and it wiped out the guitar completely. We could no longer hear the guitar for the time he was on that cymbal. I think for the guitarist's point of view, Alan was playing maybe a little bit higher up the neck once again, all through that passage, maybe a little more forcefully. So slightly different sonic range. But how did you hear that? And what'd you think about that?
Yeah, I noticed him playing it behind the trombone solo. Yes. And it sounded to me like he was playing it very lightly. He obviously lifting the sound out of the cymbal instead of beating it. And when you touch it lightly like that, you can hear the guitar underneath. And also, I believe Harry Goodman was playing in 2 at that point, and that freed up more space for the guitar too. So the bass drum wouldn't invade the sonic space of the guitar. The string bass might a little bit, especially if you played a little bit higher up. But I think basically that's Gene just backing off, not playing it very loud, just kind of touching the cymbal a little bit. for a different sound, and it left room for the guitar to be heard.
And yet there's still a lot of sound coming out of it. That's kind of what was not surprising to my ear, but really pleasant, was just how much timbre was still coming out of these instruments, and yet you could still hear everyone very clearly. It was a nice moment.
Part of that is also the setup of the cymbal. When it's flat and you play it like Gene did at that point in time, it's not like drummers now where you tilt the cymbal and the cymbal's going out towards the guitar and you're playing ding, ding, a ding, ding, a ding, ding, a ding, and all those sound waves are washing out the guitar. If it's flat and you're drawing the sound out and up, I think that leaves more room for the guitar.
We have to mention who we've been giving kudos to forever here, but once again, Harry Goodman, on those last couple of choruses there, it kind of reminds me, a name we haven't mentioned yet, I think, in terms of the bass precedence, but would be the way that John Kirby sounds as he's making the switch from the brass bass to the bass in the Henderson band, I guess, in the early 30s. And, there's just a certain kind of thing there, in those last choruses where he's really driving and audible and everything. So that's.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up Harry, Loren, because there's something I want to say about his playing that I think is very unique, and maybe there'll be some dissenting opinions, or maybe we can find some other players that are similar. In that, Harry's approach, he's got a very he doesn't have a very percussive sound, and I'm finding that as I'm again comparing some of these other rhythm sections from the same exact time period, the same exact locale, there's none of that slapping and popping that you hear in other bass players, and it's I think it's a very important sound of the Goodman rhythm section, of this kind of non-percussive, very bassy bass notes. And I don't mean count bassy. I mean, having a bassy quality, a dark, round timbre. And I don't know who else I could compare him to from the time that was in a popular jazz band that would be taking the same approach.
Artie Bernstein.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think it's interesting, because I think it's a big part of this rhythm section sound we're talking about, and it's what that does, whenever a bassist adds percussion, and I'm saying this as a potentially positive thing, when the bassist adds some percussive elements to the notes they're playing, that adds to the polyrhythms that the rhythm section is playing. And it can be fantastic. I think of players like Al Morgan, I think of Wellman Bro, even other players, even John Kirby to some extent on some records. It's an interesting texture that adds to the overall rhythm feel, but we just don't hear that in Harry Goodman's playing. And I think in Harry's case, it's definitely an attribute. It's part of this sound that we're digging. So go Harry.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that Krupa really was the sound imagination guy in that rhythm section, and he could only really do it if if Roos and Goodman were holding that thing down like this, and then he could be free to do all that stuff, as we'll see as the year goes by, as he really grows into becoming the second star in the band. The kind of guy that I think when people went to see the band, they would just watch him. Probably even on the ballad, because of all the other stuff that he might be doing, which didn't detract at all from what he was playing. I mean, I feel like in the Count Basie rhythm section, I've always felt Walter Page was really calling all the shots, and here we have a drummer. But this is it's so interesting, and we should get to music here. But I mean, Gene had only been with the band a few months. He got there in January, I guess, and this is June, right? And George Van Epps was there. Now Alan Russo. I mean, this is all just it's not Jello yet,
right? But by Harry Goodman playing what he did, the way he did, he gave Gene Krupa more freedom when he did open up to play turnarounds and rim shots. When the bass is playing real busy, lots of popping and snapping and polyrhythms, it makes it, if the drums do the same thing, it can be kind of chaotic. And I can't imagine Benny would have liked that. You know, I think he probably just liked Harry just playing time back there, whether it was 2 or 4, and let Gene do the percussive effects. And it worked out great with that combination.
Yes. Absolutely. And final word on Harry Goodman, just in this moment, is what a great tuba player he was. Brass bass or tuba. I mean, he is wonderful on those Ben Pollock records. And the small group sessions too, a big full sound, and really, really fascinating. All right, let's. Well, that was Sweet and Lovely, and it sure was not a Fletcher Henderson arrangement. And it turns out, I was looking in the book here that I did for the Benny Goodman collection at Yale, where we had gone through all the Benny Goodman things, and it turns out that there is a score in Benny's library from 1934 for Sweet and Lovely, and if it had been by Spud Murphy or Joe Lippman or Fletcher, I mean, it's obviously not by Fletcher Henderson, I would have recognized the handwriting back then, and that would have gotten to Russ, and it would have been in the book, so I just should have trusted that. This is an error, actually, in BG on the record. Excuse me, BG listened to his legacy. The 1947 version of Sweet and Lovely is by Fletcher, not this one. What would you call this? I call this like a quintessential 1933 to 35 hotel band chart. I mean, is there anything there at all that rings a Goodman bell for you guys?
Not to my ears. I mean, I don't think I could have identified this as a Benny Goodman recording had you not told me it was, or had I not known it was. Even after listening to Alan Roos as much as we have lately, there's nothing in his playing that is a dead giveaway. It's really hard to kind of understand in the later context of Benny Goodman. But again, as we talked about before, they were playing a hotel engagement around this time. It was part of what they needed to do to keep food on the table and keep gigs. And it's a nice reminder of just, it wasn't all Fletcher Henderson charts and, driving the jitterbugs crazy. There was a lot of this going on, particularly at the front end of his career.
Yeah.
The only players I would have recognized maybe on that side are Pee Wee Irwin and Frank Froba. I thought that it had Pee Wee Irwin's tone on that pretty muted trumpet solo, and I think I would have recognized Frank Froba even if I hadn't known this was a Goodman side. There's just enough of that crazy Zinky Cone Chicago playing underneath all the Carmen Cavallero licks that would have given him away.
Yeah.
But Gene Krupa was so under wraps. Well, he did play 4-beat brushes, though, where some of the hotel band drummers probably would have just played 2 and 4 on the brushes. Gene was trying to keep it a little bit jazzy there, but he didn't have much chance to do anything else.
Yeah, because even on some of the other records that we've heard that are more on the sweet side than the swing side, there seem to be at least 8 bars or something where they come in and they stamp it. This is a great jazz moment, just a great musical moment. And here, and one of you mentioned this, and it went by the first time, but shows ago, that when they were recording this for NBC for their transcription program, it's very possible, that it was made clear to them, look, Benny, you can come in and do the stuff you like to do, but we need to have so many anonymous sounding, just generic performances. And even Benny's subtone clarinet there, which you hear him do on studio dates all throughout the 1930s, that, that odd subtone clarinet sound that was a huge part of popular music all throughout the 30s. I've never heard him do it quite like this. I mean, this was really, I wouldn't say bloodless, but whatever the adjective is. And then, now I leave myself open. You said bloodless. Well, does that mean that the other ones have blood?
Well, the other things he's played when he plays a lower register, you can hear a lot of Jimmy Noon in his playing. You don't hear any jazz in that particular subtone solo. There's nothing to stamp that as Benny, and I think that's one reason this sounds so much like a hotel band. He didn't let himself loose at all. We'd know right away who was leading the band and everything else if he just played 2 bars of typical Benny Goodman heat, but he didn't do it there.
Yeah, and also just interesting to hear the way that they harmonized things back in those days. When you study the original sheet music of those songs, and I know even young jazz players today of 2020, they have enough common sense, most of the young ones anyway, who are learning this material, to try and find the sheet music. no matter where they're going to take it harmonically, to try and see, what did the composer put in the bass and what was the original chord. So at least then we know what we're doing, because we know how the guy wrote it. And just some of those, I mean, I have not looked at the sheet music of Sweet and Lovely, if I ever did, for decades. Maybe Nick has a copy. I know a lot of my friends have those kind of things. But some of the harmonizations there are just so hotel bandish, stock arrangements, and almost strange by today's standards, because they're not codified within that 2/5 harmonic universe of what has become the jazz approach to the way that we harmonize things. And it's almost like reading a 19th century novel or something, or there's something arcane about it, and interesting and beautiful. Absolutely. Yeah. All right, let's go to the fourth track from this session, and this is Fletcher Henderson, and this is one that they never commercially recorded. It showed up on the Goodman Air Check album with the Bill Savory air checks that came out on Columbia and MGM back in the 1950s. But it's one of the real classics. It's Three Little Words. So we did a little bit of time travel there. We didn't preview it, so you're wondering what the heck happened. We heard the Thesaurus Rhythm Makers version from June 1935, and then we went to a live air check. Well, a dead air check, a live air check, a broadcast performance from late 1937 with the Goodman Band when they had achieved that 1937 pinnacle. And it's funny, I think in terms of the ensemble playing and the phrasing and the band, I would say the second one is superior. They had a couple of years to get to know the chart. Everything's just like this. In the Thesaurus Rhythm Makers, that's really the first time that we've heard a real goof, frankly. I mean, there's a clam in the brass section, and it's not perfect, and I'm sure that Benny would have liked to have done it again. But the way the rhythm section plays is really different on the two. It seems like by the second one they had zoomed into this thing that's more like this and exciting. And I'm just going to unload here, I never paid this much attention to Alan Roos and Harry Goodman in my life. I've been listening to this music like you guys have, for decades. You know what I mean? And I love it, and I've listened to it and all that. But it's a joy at this point, after so many years into it, just to be looking at it from a different angle. And as many times as I've listened to that second Three Little Words, because it's a classic, performance, I never did it through the vantage point of what are Harry and Alan doing. And so I'm wondering what you guys heard in terms of the different approach on both tracks.
I was very taken with what Gene played on the Rhythm Makers track. Who's playing kind of little mess around patterns behind Benny, not really straight time and not a full-blown solo over the clarinet, but just a little bit of something like approbation of what Benny was playing, like, yeah, I hear you. And, just adding an exclamation point to what the clarinet was doing. I love the way they made the two-beat feel swing with the Rhythm Makers transcription. And Harry Goodman basically staying in two. And I heard the two beat from Alan Roos and hardly anything from Frank Froba, but they were all so much more animated on that later recording. As you said, obviously they know how each guy knows how the other guy's going to play and how to react to it. Mm-hmm. Plus they had Jess Stacy by then, so there's even more of an element of excitement there. But that one sounded like it needed to have a lid on it, or it was just going to explode. There's so much excitement in that rhythm section, and it translated to the horns playing too. They were really feeding off what the rhythm was doing there.
Although the biggest difference I heard from the first and the second version was just the amount that the rhythm section was digging in. That 37 version sounded like, it sounded like almost like a dance performance, a dance gig, where it was just kind of dig your heels in, just, straighten out that beat like we've talked about before, and just keep pressing forward. I was kind of surprised how two major changes in Roos's playing between the performances were not only the time he was playing. I mean, he was almost entirely in 4/4 that second version, but also he changed his voicings. He was playing much more at the mid range of the instruments, like something you expect to hear from Freddie Green. Subsequent years, 38, 39. Freddie really liked that kind of lower end of the instrument, the kind of more woody, full sound. So it was interesting to hear him play like that. As far as a preference, it's kind of like two ways of attacking the same chart. And first of all, I love the chart. It's a fantastic chart. It's kind of too bad, Benny didn't record it commercially, or at least didn't, play it more often, from what we know. But yeah, like you were saying, how, the rhythm section, there's a lot more texture in the first version. a lot more kind of passing the baton of like who is emphasizing the beat at any given measure. You could hear some really, again, some more interesting cymbal work from Gene, kind of under different soloists, and subtle cymbal work that wasn't necessarily just, all out, let's go for it. More like, let me give some more accent and more support to this particular soloist. But they both were great versions. And,
Sure.
that second version is just kind of so classic Benny Goodman. And again, like no other rhythm section sounded like that in 1937. That was very much a proprietary thing by the time they reached that point of their career.
Yeah. Tenor sax by Art Rollini. The trombone on the first was Jack Lacey. The trombone solo on the second one was Vernon Brown, which is how we know how late it is in 1937 when he came into the band. I'll tell you what, we've done this on a few other shows. Let's hear one more version, a version with Dave Tuff. Same chart, but this is Dave Tuff, Harry Goodman, Ben Heller. And Bud Freeman, I assume, must be on this one from 1938, so it'll make a nice comparison. In a way, that's really not even a fair comparison. In a way, because they took it so fast. And it's really a different chart because they can't do the same kind of things. But interesting nonetheless. I'll just start with, Dave Tuff could put accents in on 2 and 4 on the bass drums in just like really unusual places. And I heard a couple of those just like odd, interesting things. But it seems at that tempo, he was pretty much locked into just keeping it going with the very, very busy hi-hat work. And we didn't get that much of a sense of what he usually did, which was to spread very wide and do things on there. Bud Freeman and Vernon Brown on the solos, too. And, man, it just went by. I mean, it's almost not a 2-beat, but I don't know what the hell it was. It sounds rushed to me.
I think that's kind of a forerunner of the way Dave Tuff would play with Woody Herman at those bright tempos, where it's just kind of a wall of sound on the cymbals. Yeah. Only in this case, the hi-hat was the primary thing he was playing with the crashes on his small diameter cymbals that he had at that time. Yeah. That's the biggest difference in the drum sound between the earlier ones, the earlier versions, and this is by 1938, most drummers had shifted to the hi-hat and the cymbals as the primary timekeeping part of the drum set, off of the snare drum, not playing press rolls or rims or some of the devices you hear the drummers play in earlier times. Ray Baduke was one of the very few who kept that going, the earlier style with Bob Crosby, and George Wetland to some degree on some of his Commodore records with Bud Freeman and Eddie Condon. But Dave Tuff was going Joe Jones and beyond by this time, and just really laying into the hi-hat and those wonderful cymbal accents. He also had a way of playing random accents with his left hand on the snare drum, instead of just playing every second and fourth beat on the snare drum. He just played them in random places. And once the fidelity of recordings becomes good enough to where you can hear what he's doing very clearly, he did that with almost every band he played with. You never know where it's going to land, but it really grabs your attention. What's he going to do next?
Yeah. I have to say that when you clapped your hands, I don't know, Nick, if you saw the same thing, that the hand clap didn't come through. So it's kind of amazing, but we saw it. And so I just want to let the folks out there in television land, to know that you don't have to move your bunny ears to get Captain Video better, Nick, was there anything? I mean, I could hardly hear a guitar in there, but
yeah, that's welcome to late 30s, early 40s swing, right? It gets increasingly difficult, and I heard it. What I heard Ben Heller doing was just again kind of digging in, like taking what we heard Alan Roos do in the prior recording and taking to the next level, which is like the tempo's called off pretty briskly, and just making sure you keep that chug going along. I heard a real distinct chunk, 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 and it's just that 4/4 beat that underpins kind of the best of swing from that era. And the flash all gets transferred over to the drum set, and it's fine. I mean, interestingly, like we've talked a little bit about how the cymbals kind of compete with where the guitar is. This is a good example of Heller found a pretty good space in the guitar to keep that beat going, in spite of the cymbals. It wasn't the same register. So, not the greatest example of swing era rhythm guitar playing, but as I said in an earlier episode, I think Ben Heller's biggest fault was the fact that he came in right after Alan Roos. I mean, I think he possibly could be evaluated under different terms if he'd kind of come into the band at a different time, or maybe was recorded with different fidelity. But solid. They got through it.
Yeah. I'll tell you, just in our wide-ranging string of association style here, with some of the things that we do, I just feel like we have to give Ben Heller his moment here, because we're not going to get to him for quite a while if we ever get into 1938. But I want you guys to hear something, just to give Ben Heller his due. We'll hear him very well recorded in very great company, just for a moment here, just to define him, since we've been talking about Ben Heller, who took Alan Roos's place in the band on the guitar.
then. Come on there, boy.
I noticed one thing, Tuff and Krupa, when they played hi-hat and cymbal crashes, hit them a lot harder than Joe Jones. And there's more going on, more cymbal crashes. Joe tended to just play a rim shot now and then, or echo a phrase that Buck Clayton or Prez played, or a hit that's part of the arrangement, rather than cymbal crashes. So you hear more of Freddie Green because there's less cymbal. That nice light, just kind of amplifying Freddie Green, and there's not a lot of crashing that competes with his space. Chick Webb, another, hit the cymbals really hard, hi-hat and the crash cymbals, rim shots, tempo blocks, and poor John Trueheart had to compete with all of that. But Freddie Green, with almost all the drummers he worked with that I can think of, they left him lots of space. Like that Lionel Hampton session with Benny Carter on trumpet and Coleman Hawkins and Ed Hall. Zudi generally just plays a brush on a small cymbal, 4-beat bass drum, 4 beats with the left hand, no hi-hat. So you hear Freddie Green clear as day on that session. And most of the sessions I can think of, Freddie Green dominates the rhythm section. That's fine with me. That's got my vote. But I can't think of any where he's really competing with a drummer from the older recordings anyway, as opposed to what Ben Heller was dealing with there on Three Little Words. Yeah.
Nick, we're going to add anything about Ben's chording on that?
I thought it was fantastic. I mean, it was pretty exemplary as far as I'm concerned. You know, that it shows just the ability of kind of an average, if we can call Ben Heller average, you know, swing era rhythm guitarist. You know, the ability they had to alter their voicings for the situation. You know, it's very likely he was not playing the same voicings, playing the same place in the neck on that Benny Goodman recording that he was on that jam session recording. And he's adding so much more musical information on that version of T for Two. And even under the different soloists, he's playing higher up, playing a little more harmonic movement under Prez. And then when Roy steps up, he drops that down a bit, pairs it back a little bit, changes his voicing slightly. And, you know, as we talked about before, he drops out entirely under Teddy Wilson, which, you know, is not only an effect, but maybe respect to some extent. I don't know. It's definitely seems like something that was fairly common back in the day. But at the same time, it's definitely, you know, very much affected in some ways. But the bottom line is, I think it just shows how good of a player Heller was, and it's a shame that we don't have more recordings that show kind of, you know, his full scope of capabilities, because that's wonderful rhythm guitar playing on that recording.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, listen, all of this, I think, helps us place the Goodman's Thesaurus Rhythm Makers session in even better context, because we're hearing it, you know, a later Goodman band, a jam session with nobody in Benny and Teddy Wilson are there, and Ben Heller, but a totally different setting. And I think it makes it all the more interesting just to kind of widen the context. So thanks, Nick. Thanks, Hal. And we'll be back for more Thesaurus Rhythm Makers.